The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, dedicated to creating access to financial well-being for local people, businesses, and communities. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, we'll learn how you can have a delicious night out that also happens to help your heat-insecure neighbors, as we speak with the Executive Director of Community Action Pioneer Valley about next week's Eat Up for Heat Up fundraiser.
And we'll learn about Western Mass's connection to Western Africa with Clark University Professor Usman Power Green with a power of history that crosses the Atlantic Ocean to Liberia.
But first, is a galaxy without stars even really a galaxy?
I don't know. How important should the Prime Directive be to the stories made canon in the Trekiverse?
Let's look at both questions through a local lens.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Time for some more kitchen table astronomy with Hampshire College astronomer Dr. Salman Hamid, the head of Kainat Studios. And we also have a Hampshire College connection that we're going to talk about. And Kainat Studios is going to talk about because the next couple times we talk to you, we will talk to you from Pakistan, because Kainat is the cosmos of South Asia. And Salman Hamid is the Carl Sagan of South Asia. And we'll get to all of that. And we're also going to talk about Star Trek.
Yeah, I should mention this was not scheduled to be talked about, but
Because we do a lot of pop culture. We did Pluribus last week. You're on the board of Amherst Cinemas. We talk a lot about movies and film, but Star Trek, you're lifelong Trekkie.
I mean, I'm not sort of like all in Trekkie because it's a little embarrassing, but yeah, Next Generation was actually really good. Here is the thing. We may have talked about it not on the radio, but separately, how much I hate J.J. Abrams' interpretation of Star Trek, which is not different from any other thing, because Star Trek, what made it good was its philosophical take on things and its political take on things, because it was never great on special effects. But what it was great was about providing a particular type of vision of the future. And by the way, if there is a time that we need a vision of the future, it's right now.
Yeah. Everybody that complains about why did Star Trek decide it's going to go woke, Star Trek invented woke on TV.
That is right. And so in the original one, Uhura was the first major sort of like now African-American character that was there.
And she almost quit the show. And who convinced her not to quit? Frickin' Martin Luther King Jr. himself.
Right. So, and also at the height of the Cold War, you had a Russian on the deck of the Enterprise. And this was all deliberate because Roddenberry, of course, the creator of Star Trek, he actually wanted to bring in these issues in a TV series separately, but he kept on getting no. You cannot bring, for example, interracial issues in the 1960s on television. And so he said, well, how about it's in space? And people are like, oh, this is sort of like, totally fictional.
Yeah.
So that was incredible in the first interracial kiss, and that was very controversial episode at the time. That all took place on Star Trek. And then in the Next Generation, it really explored a lot more philosophical issues. And they corrected some of the things that were problematic in the original Star Trek. So in the original Star Trek, Captain Kirk was too gung-ho about interfering in the affairs of other planetary species and also telling them about what is right. Mm-hmm. So very colonial thinking. So it was woke in the sense of like, it did a lot of good things, but also there were problematic aspects in there. But because of a lot of post-colonial studies that were coming up in the 1970s in particular, by the time Star Trek, The Next Generation came out in the late 1980s, they actually incorporated that, and then Captain Picard was much more sensitive to these kind of issues.
Shut up, Wesley.
So that was great, all of that. And then Star Trek Voyager was great as a woman captain. But then J.J. Abrams, who actually famously said, he never watched any of the Star Trek. But he was directing and producing the newer film rebooted versions of it. And so you basically strip out all of the philosophy or all of the issues that Star Trek was dealing with, and you're left with just with action. And so there was no difference to that. Recently, there have been a couple of good Star Trek series, but there is a new one out. I've seen 2 episodes of it. I think 2 episodes are out on Paramount Plus, and it is called Starfleet Academy. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the trailer, it looks like more like, oh, it's just going to be about action. But I was surprised. I saw it with my 12-year-old, who's you sometimes forced to watch Star Trek The Next Generation.
My 12-year-old also forced to watch it. Not a big fan. Loves Star Wars. Not a big into any Star Trek stuff.
But he loved Starfleet Academy.
Uh-huh.
And what I was surprised about was that Starfleet Academy, this is the new show. Starfleet Academy, it's a university. It is rebooting after something bad had happened about 100 years before the timeline of the show. And they've really lost their values of what they teach in the academia. And so considering what has been happening in the United States in the last year or so, you can even think about last couple of decades where a lot of the corporatization of higher education and also much more explicitly the crackdown on Gaza protests, for example, including here at UMass. And that was under President Biden, by the way, not under President Trump. And then last year where President Trump also cracked down on universities, and the response of the universities has been to figure out how can we save our heads and compromise. Now, I don't want to lump everything in there, and I know decisions are hard, and some people have actually stood up. Wesleyan president is actually president of Wesleyan University, is actually a great example. But, for example, Columbia University just capitulated. And a lot of these things are under the guise of censorship or under the guise of free speech or under the guise of controlling anti-Semitic speech. A lot of the times it's about controlling dissent. But universities, I mean, idealized version of university is a place where you get challenged. It's a place where you get to experience opposite views and intellectually engage with them. Because if you don't get challenged in a university, where else are you going to get challenged?
Yeah.
And that ethos, in some ways, I mean, if you talk about universities today, I mean, what is happening in Minneapolis? I mean, I would have thought that right now there would be protests all across campuses in the US. But they're not. There are protests happening in Northampton and Amherst. I mean, there are town protests and things like that. But universities are the place where, like, you know, these type of things that should take place. And hopefully they will. But right now, the universities are a little sort of like, okay, how can we not stick our head out because otherwise we will get shut down?
In fairness, a lot of universities are still on break.
That is true. But I hope, but in general, I mean, I'm talking about sort of like, you know, in the last year or so as well. I mean, it's been like sort of like, you know, okay, how can we keep our heads down? And Starfleet Academy, that's where, coming back to Star Trek, it is tapping into that particular aspect, that what is a university for? How can it deal with intellectual aspects? How can it deal with political aspects? How could it deal with activism? And this is exactly what Star Trek originally was about, sort of like, you know, dealing with what is in the culture, within the society. How can you challenge those type of things that have become a little bit of a norm? And so to me, surprising element, I've only seen 2 episodes. There is Holly Hunter in it, Paul Giamatti in it.
Nice. There's
there's another person, Britt Marlin, who's been actually written and starred in some of the sci-fi, good, thoughtful sci-fi as well. So that's what Starfleet Academy is. I think it's pretty entertaining, but ultimately it is dealing with a theme of our time, and it's challenging what a good university should be like.
And to tie it into the universities, first of all, Paul Giamatti's, I think, father founded the Italian department at Mount Holyoke. Second of all, Eugene Roddenberry, the son of Gene Roddenberry, Star Trek creator, Hampshire alum.
And a producer of this show.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's a local Hampshire connection as well. Woohoo!
Now, a little bit of actual astronomy. You found a galaxy that has no stars? Or you maybe didn't find it.
I did not find it. Right, so this is, for the first time, it looks like, that astronomers have found a cloud of gas. I mean, astronomers have found these kind of clouds, but never spread out thin enough that you can detect the gas. And so it's hydrogen gas. But usually there are still some stars that are in there. And in this galaxy, they have looked and have found no stars. This particular cloud is it's about roughly 14 million light years away. It's a nearby galaxy. And the second thing I wanted to mention about this is it is found by Chinese astronomers using actually what is now the largest single aperture radio telescope. It's called 500 meter aperture spherical telescope, or FAST.
Ah, good acronym.
And they found it in 2023. And the reason I'm mentioning that is this is also part of the changing world, because now more and more we see discoveries made by telescopes in China or Chinese astronomers. This year, I think, or in the next year or two, they're also going to have launch their own space telescope as well. So we are already seeing this change in the world where we're not just talking about NASA discoveries, but we are also talking about something that was coming from China. So they were looking at a few gas clouds around this galaxy M94, which is a spiral galaxy. And the ninth one, and they were going cloud 1, cloud 2, cloud 3, and this ninth one happened to be cloud 9.
Oh, wow.
This was a little different because it is not a lot of hydrogen gas in it, but it's very spread out. And then they got time on the Hubble Space Telescope, and so this is where collaborations still come in. Those are important. And they really tried to find stars in this cloud of gas, because if you have clouds, usually there are pockets that collapse and then you have stars in it. But in this one, they kept on looking for it, and there is just no stars. It expects that you would have a dark matter halo around it. It is keeping the gas in there, but no stars.
It has a black hole at the center like most galaxies?
No, not at this level. No, there is nothing in it. It's just hydrogen gas sitting in it, right? So this is actually unusual. But you expect that eventually there would be pockets that would collapse and produce stars. But in this case, it didn't happen.
And it's not because it's so young that the stars haven't formed yet, or is it?
No, it's just too spread out.
Wow.
It just it hasn't collapsed in. So this is the first example of something like this, which is spread out enough. I mean, you can find small clouds of just gas, but this is big enough. In fact, it's about 4,000 light years across, but no stars in it. And this may be primordial gas, meaning to say because you enrich hydrogen gas, or you enrich the what astronomers call an interstellar medium. You enrich it by when stars explode. When stars sort of give back process elements inside the star, and then it enriches the gas, because in the Big Bang, you only had hydrogen and helium pretty much. All the other elements, other than lithium, were pretty much formed inside stars. So carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, or iron, or any other things were either formed inside stars or in exploding stars. So what is in there? If there are no stars, you may just have this pristine gas, just hydrogen and helium, left over doing nothing. So this is really exciting discovery. This is the first time astronomers have found basically a cloud which looks like it is surrounded by dark matter halo. We don't see dark matter either,
right,
but we just see this spread out gas.
I like it cloud 9 because it's just like chilling out there doing nothing. And that's kind of what I want to do. I want to be a galaxy filled with hydrogen doing nothing. No stars.
I don't think you would like that.
I would like it for a long time. And then I'd get bored. I'd create a star eventually.
Yeah, you would want to go, and you don't even want to live in the Earth, 30,000 light years away from the center of the Milky Way. You want to be at the center of the Milky Way where all the action is.
Well, we'll be checking in with the action with you from Pakistan over the next couple of weeks and hear about some of the exciting stuff that you are inaugurating in the world of astronomy in your home nation of Pakistan.
Well, thank you. Keep in touch about this.
Speaking of cold places like space, we'll speak about the upcoming Eat Up for Heat Up fundraiser, where you can eat locally to help your heat insecure neighbors, with Executive Director of Community Action Pioneer Valley, Lev Ben Ezra.
But first, a movement started a whole nation, and the U.S. is very connected with that particular origin story. We'll talk with another one of our regular guests, very far away. Professor Usman Power Green, about his time in Liberia, next.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Dean's Beans Organic Coffee, a locally based, worker-owned company committed to social and environmental responsibility, roasting fair trade, organic, shade-grown coffee since 1993. DeansBeans.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Eastside Grill, celebrating 40 years in downtown Northampton, serving steaks, seafood, and American cuisine to the Pioneer Valley and beyond. Open Wednesday through Monday. EastSideGrill.com.
Well, it's time once again for our monthly segment, The Power of History, with Northampton's Professor of History from Clark University, Dr. Usman Power Green. But this is a special Power of History because you are not in the 413. You're not even in the 508 in Worcester, where Clark University is. Where are we speaking to you from, Professor Usman Power Green?
Yes, welcome everybody. Checking in from Monrovia, Liberia. That's in West Africa for those that don't know. And very excited to be here doing research and connecting with folk, looking at the history of African Americans who came and settled here from the Northeast, Massachusetts, New York, Connecticut, places like that.
Let's first talk a little bit about the history and the founding of Liberia, which some folks may know. Give us the Cliff Notes history of Liberia so people are a little more familiar.
Yeah, so Liberia is one of the few countries, it's the only country in Africa that was essentially a place that was settled by Black Americans beginning in the 1820s, has its independence in 1847, and then, of course, during periods since the 19th century, have been very much involved with U.S. politics and history because we have this history of Black Americans settling here. The capital city, Monrovia, is named after our former, our president, James Monroe, for example. And when you walk around the city of Liberia, everybody, you see street names of prominent Americans who were sort of involved with the early settlement here in Liberia.
Your research has taken you there for what specifically? What are you focusing on? You mentioned a little bit about Massachusetts or New England residents going there. Tell us what you're working on, Professor Ousmane Power.
Yeah, so I've been working on a book since 2015 about African Americans that left mostly the Northeast to settle in Liberia between 1820 and around 1880. My sort of primary interest is looking at those that left from the Northeast, places where there wasn't slavery formally. And that big question, why did people choose to leave the United States and think they could find a better life on other shores while other people from Europe particularly are coming here searching for a better life?
And I think even some folks that we ascribe to the liberation movement here and emancipation, including, if I'm not mistaken, Abraham Lincoln himself, kind of had the idea that was like, might it be better if you guys all go back to Africa?
We're like, to where?
Yeah. So tell us about some of those things that you've been uncovering about how it did work out for some of the people that did make that decision. Was it for some people the better decision?
Yeah, so actually most of the story of Liberia's history is dominated by the American Colonization Society, which is an organization that was established officially in 1817 that was made up of slaveholders and the most prominent Americans. Henry Clay, for example, from Kentucky. There were many members actually, that believed that there was no way we were going to end slavery in the United States unless we had a plan for sending Black Americans somewhere else. And so the question was, where would you send these newly freed people? And so many of the early founders supported what I call a deportationist agenda, right? An agenda that said, we can't possibly emancipate African Americans and keep them here. And so early on, the project was dominated by Southerners who, many of them, including people like Abraham Lincoln, who's not a Southerner, but also believed that Liberia would be a place to send African Americans once emancipation happened. There's a lot of reasons why that never sort of happened and how challenging that would even be on a financial level to send hundreds of thousands or even millions of people abroad would be extraordinary. So yeah, that is absolutely the case. Also, my real focus, this uneasy alliance, are the Black Americans who were against the movement because they saw it as a deportation project, but then switched and ended up going, right? And so, my work really looks at the intersections of the emergence of Liberia as a nation.
Were there any notable stories or individuals that you've uncovered from specifically New Englanders who've made this decision that are of interest to you and might be of interest to us and our listeners too?
Two dramatic moments of people, particularly from Massachusetts, going, and some of them that went in the 1820s and 1826 were actually also from Rhode Island. And so they went from Rhode Island, a few were gathered from Massachusetts, arrived in Boston. And one of the figures, Newport Gardner, who was from Newport, Rhode Island, was actually one of the early Black songwriters. So y'all can look up Newport Gardner. And Newport Gardner was involved in an early movement to Liberia in the 1780s, to West Africa, at least before there was a Liberia. And then late in life, decides that he's going to, toss his lot. And as he says, when he's interviewed on the ship, I'm going to set example for the young people in my race that they should go back to Africa and attempt to, to build a homeland there. And so Newport Gardner, everybody, is one of the more famous early people who are going to leave for Liberia. And then I write about another group in 1850s that leaves from Cambridge, Mass. Some of whom were living and intersecting with Harvard and decided that they wanted this community of people to go. There are smaller people that are somewhat obscure who are going to join the Hamden County, which is colonization society, 1820s and 30s and 40s. It's a really sort of fascinating study of, from an African American perspective, this sort of idea that we can go and connect and find a homeland somewhere else.
There's an effort right now to digitize a lot of the history of Liberia to make it easier to access for anybody who really wants access for it. It's at its beginning stages, but what's it like interacting with some of the things that now are findable online?
Yeah, so actually one of the reasons that I'm here, and for those that are not aware of how history is sort of created and made, is through sources, through papers, letters, documents. One of the challenges, that Liberia, like many places that were through long civil war, 19-year civil war, is getting the archive back up and running, and getting scholars to return to it and use it in order to push forward the history. I was excited this summer when I ran into Andrew Wedgman, who teaches at Texas Tech, because he's like, I found all these documents in Liberia. And so I was obviously eager, like, wow, everyone says there's nothing in the archives because of the war. And already being down the archives and meeting with the director, meeting with the staff there, I already was able to digitize 2 folders. And today I was blessed to be honored there. They gave me a shirt, and it's sort of like, we welcome you, and we hope other scholars will come and see that the archives are open for anyone in the world who wants to do research about Liberia.
You're also in contact with the Kofi Annan Center for Conflict Resolution, and we can't ignore the fact that this whole story sounds very, very familiar to what is currently happening. Are you also finding parallels in the documents that you're engaging with to some stuff that's happening now?
A lot of us, when we do professional historical work, we work actually at a certain period, and we're not quick to make big jump leaps to the present. So the listeners just know that most of us who are historians are not going to do that. We'll focus on our time period. With that said, part of my meeting today with the University of Liberia's Kofi Annan Center for Peace, they're doing work in the field all throughout the nation, doing interviews around, the experience around violence during the Civil War. Many in the rural communities really don't know the history of Liberia and their own ethnic history. And so our meeting today was a conversation about how to strategize with those of us who are doing historical work and those like them who are out literally, they did over 1,000 interviews, everybody, listeners, for those who were involved with the conflict in the Civil War, because they've built trust. So, as you all can imagine who are listening, giving your documents, diaries, letters, telling family histories, really require trust. People don't just turn over their materials, even if you're a small church or school or a community, quickly to outside researchers. And so our meeting was a great meeting today with Professor Debbie Sandy at the Kofi Annan Center at University of Liberia, about how to work together with historians who are interested in learning the entire nation's history. I'm really looking forward to this partnership and connection.
Speaking with Clark University Professor of History, Dr. Ousmane Power Green, Northampton's own Power of History segment, a regular segment here in the Fabulous 413. And you are speaking to us from Monrovia in Liberia, which was settled by African Americans. I don't know how many other African nations you've been to, but does Liberia have a different feel that feels more American than African, or where does it fall on that African-American spectrum?
Yeah, that's a really, me and my colleague, Eric McDuffie from University of Illinois is out here with me. And he just did a book about Garvey in the Midwest. Some Garveyites, Marcus Garvey, for those who don't know, there were some Garveyites who came to Liberia. So his book looks at, and that's sort of what brought him here research-wise. And we've been having that conversation because many African-Americans have been to Ghana, because Ghana in the 1960s, the president at the time, Kwame Nkrumah, welcomed Black Americans, said, Ghana's your home. And there were a good portion of African-American or Africans who were enslaved in the slave trade went through Cape Coast Castle, which is in Ghana, and Elmina, which is in Ghana. And so a lot of African-Americans will choose Ghana as their destination. Liberia, on the other hand, really does not have as many sort of American tourists. It's not a place that's necessarily on the line of places that even African-Americans would go or other people. Because I study the early history, I actually know the people, the names of the streets. And so when I was with some friends who work in various sectors, and I was telling them this, Buchanan Street, and I was telling them who these people are, they were really surprised because, again, back to the feel. I mean, Monrovia is named after James Monroe. The streets are named after oftentimes prominent white colonizationists who were ministers or politicians who worked for the American Colonization Society, or Thomas Buchanan, who worked for the Maryland Colonization Society and becomes the governor of Liberia. And so they're really unaware, of these sort of street signs and names. And so for me, as a, sort of an African-American historian, the feel is, wow, this is really interesting seeing all these places that are named after Americans actually in Liberia.
And looking for folks from New England, from Massachusetts, who went to Liberia, are you finding a difference in time that they showed up? Like, did more people go as Garveyites, or right after the end of the Civil War, like during Restoration?
Yeah, that's a really good question in terms of quantity of people and movement wise. The answer is that I don't know, which is what all of us professors should say when we don't know answers.
And all of us human beings,
all
really.
of us human beings. It's okay
Exactly.
to not know things. It inclines you to go and do more
listening is
research.
Okay. I have not seen a study of sort of a quantitative study of African Americans that went. The head of the Garvey movement will actually move the headquarters in the 70s to Liberia. I haven't seen a quantitative study. We've estimated between the founding of Liberia and about 1870 or so, around 16,000 roughly of African Americans who went, but there hasn't been like a comparative study where we've attempted to track, sort of like total migration patterns. I have been running into a lot of people of Liberian descent who were in the States for long periods of times and have come back. At least informally, everybody, there is a sense that people are returning who have been abroad. And of course, all nations need people to return. There's something called the brain drain. I don't know if people are familiar with that, but frequently countries in Africa, Latin America, people will go to school in the United States and stay. And that sometimes can be very challenging, right? Because the countries need the expertise in whatever area. So that's a whole other subtopic, but certainly of, conversation people are having here in Liberia.
Speaking of people going back and forth between nations and immigration, Professor Usman Power Green, who's in Monrovia, Liberia right now, Liberia is one of the countries on President Trump's new suspended immigration list. What's the reaction been to people that you've been speaking to, despite the fact that this nation was founded by African Americans? They are now no longer welcome as immigrants back to the United States.
I mean, we're also kind of not welcome as citizens, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, that was a conversation that people were, I was sort of informally talking to some young people working NGOs here and journalists, like I mentioned, and sort of, a discussion we had at lunch. And that question, debate over dual citizenship is actually at least a conversation that younger people are having about should African Americans, all African Americans, just be able to get dual citizenship in Liberia because of this unique history. There is a sense of disappointment. Before the travel ban happened, Liberia was a country that was not on the earlier ban. And so my cab driver and others we were having this conversation. They were very proud that of all the nations on the continent, that Liberia was one that was accepted by the United States. And so now, since I've been here, everybody who's listening, that's changed. I was just reading the Liberian newspaper today, and they were interviewing different people, and there was at least some view among at least one of the sort of ordinary people being interviewed by the journalists that Liberia was the spokesperson for the condemnation of the United States invasion of Venezuela. And so there was at least one person, off the, sort of on the street being interviewed who thought perhaps this was retaliation for Liberia's, position.
Wow. Professor Usman Power Green, our regular monthly segment, The Power of History, Clark University professor from Northampton in Monrovia, Liberia. We hope that you have no problem coming back to your home here in the 413.
I mean, we can't take this stuff for granted anymore.
And I will point out that I have been had an opportunity, speaking of that, to have lunch with the officer in charge here in Liberia. He facilitated me giving a talk at the U.S. Embassy in Liberia. And so while, whatever people's political views are, or however the bigger, broader politics, the United States Embassy is eager for there to be constant dialogue and to teach teachers about this early history, to teach community members about the connection between the United States and Liberia. And this, of course, as I said, really is not related to any political decision or policy decision. Because of this unique history and particularly my research about the Northeast, people were shocked. The response was, we had no idea people came from Massachusetts and Connecticut and other places to Liberia. We just thought they were from the South.
What's your favorite thing you've eaten in Liberia?
Oh, chicken Liberian way, everybody. Okay. Chicken Liberian, which is sort of jollof rice. Liberians say, of course, they make it the best.
Everyone who makes jollof says they make it the best.
Exactly. Of course, they're supposed to say that.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I was at a friend's house and they made okra. This okra, Liberian okra dish. Now that I said that, shout out to Asada Shannon and her awesome okra stew that she made when I was invited over. I'm going to say that's my favorite dish. So I'll take back the chicken Liberian way.
That makes me
hungry.
Shannon.
Yeah, you're making me hungry.
Making me wicked hungry.
Professor Ousmane Power Green, the power of history from Liberia. Thank you so much for checking in from another continent.
All right. Thanks a lot. See y'all soon.
And now a really good reason to plan to go out to eat next week when we speak with Lev Ben Ezra of Community Action Pioneer Valley about the Eat Up for Heat Up fundraiser happening next week, raising funds for the heat insecure in our area.
And about the ongoing impact of federal ebbs and flows and upcoming state budgets on their funding that they use for this programming and more.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar in Hatfield, specializing in solar installations, battery storage, and clean energy solutions tailored to the homes and businesses of Western Massachusetts. Northeast-solar.com.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. Local restaurants are uniting to fight food and fuel insecurity during Eat Up for Heat Up Week, starting this Sunday, January 25th through January 31st.
Community Action Pioneer Valley, the anti-poverty agency serving over 28,000 people navigating poverty annually, is behind Eat Up for Heat Up, a week-long dining event running where local restaurants across Franklin and Hampshire counties will donate a portion of their proceeds to help keep our neighbors fed, warm, supported, and connected this winter.
Each participating restaurant is selected one day during the event to donate a portion of that day's proceeds to the new Claire Higgins Fund for Community Resilience, which helps fill the gaps to keep our neighbors fed, warm, supported, and connected all winter. The need in our community, as you may imagine, has never been greater.
And getting more so as we hear NPR stories about the increasing costs of electricity and more.
And everything, yes. And we are joined by the new Executive Director of Community Action, Lev Ben Ezra, who's been on the show many times and wearing several different hats in those times. Congratulations on your first inaugural year as the head of this wonderful anti-poverty agency in our area.
Thank you so much. I am so glad to be here and just deeply honored to be working with the incredible staff and community partners at Community Action Pioneer Valley, where through our programs, we are keeping 28,000 of our neighbors every year fed, warm, supported, and connected. And I'm just grateful to be here to talk about this exciting event.
We've had Community Action on a bunch of times, and we had a sort of a farewell interview with Claire Higgins, whose fund this money will go towards. She's now retired, the former mayor of Northampton. But if you're not familiar with the whole umbrella of services that Community Action provides, tell us, Lev, a couple of those things that you do provide for those 28,000 people.
So Community Action Pioneer Valley is a part of the Community Action Network. So there are community action organizations all around this country that are really designed to help, and we are no different, that are designed to support folks who are living with low incomes and really meet hyper-local needs so that we, every couple of years, do an intensive assessment of what is going on in our local community. And then we weave together resources, whether those are federal, state, local, and private resources to help meet the needs of our neighbors who are living in economic poverty. And right here in the Pioneer Valley, that looks like programs such as Head Start, so early learning programs, where we're not only providing a really safe and stable environment for young kids to learn and grow and thrive, but this incredible wraparound approach that welcomes families in and just works with them on their goals and what they need to have better housing stability. It looks like programs such as our workforce development programs, where we're working with teens and young adults and adults of all ages to overcome barriers that they have to their own economic stability and engagement in the workforce. And also key safety net programs like our food programs or fuel assistance. And so ultimately, across all of these, the commonality is that we believe that in our community and right here in the Valley, that everybody should have the tools and the resources that they need to survive and to take the next steps in their lives. We really trust folks as the experts in their own lives, and we partner with them to take those next steps and make sure that they have the resources that they need.
You mentioned that these reports come out every 10 years. Is that like with the census, or when was the last one that you had done, and what changes in your programming happened because of it?
I think I said every few years.
Every few years,
several
sorry.
years. Yeah, so we actually do a needs assessment every 3 years. We have a survey that goes out to current participants in our program, and also a more broad survey that goes out to community members who could be participants in our programs, or other community service providers that utilize our services, and make referrals and really ask both what are we doing that is working well and where are the gaps. And then that really guides those efforts to say, okay, here's an area that needs more focus, or is this still the right place to be focusing, or do we need to shift gears and look someplace else? We're speaking with Lev Ben Ezra, the Executive Director of Community Action of the Pioneer Valley. We're going to talk about their Eat Up for Heat Up week, which starts this Sunday in just a little bit. But if you listen to the station today and the news, everything is tumultuous when it comes to the federal government and the global government, really. And we're hearing reports one day, lie heap, the low-income heating assistance, federal dollars is not going to come. And then it is going to come. Mental health studies money is not going to come, but then it is going to come. What are you anticipating for the services that you provide through community action when it comes to federal dollars, and or how are you bolstering against what may not come when it comes to federal dollars? There can be no question about the cost and the challenges posed by this degree of uncertainty of this resource is here, it's taking away, it's coming back, we have to advocate for it. And two things that I will say about that is that almost regardless of whether or not it's restored at the end, when we hear these stories in the news, the people for whom these programs, they are not theoretical, they are not headlines, they are their lifelines. Yes. And for the folks who are relying on these programs, seeing that it brings instability and fear and tumult into their lives. And then on the organizational side, we are having to then invest and spend energy planning and troubleshooting and reaching out to our elected representatives and encouraging our community members to do the same, and coming up with backup plans and thinking about staffing contingencies or how we would close a program if the funding really did go away. And all of that is a cost that happens and real harm that is caused even when ultimately that funding is restored. So of course, the funding being restored is absolutely what we need, and it is worth every bit of energy and advocacy and more.
The thing about these cuts is that the amount of instability that it introduces to these organizations has to be felt by the people who use those organizations as well. How have you seen their interaction and worry about that? What I'm hearing in this question is, how are organizations communicating what is really happening to community members? How do community members reconcile what they are hearing in the news, their day-to-day experiences, their emotional emotional responses to the combinations of the trauma that they have in their lives and the trauma that this kind of instability causes? And I think that what this current moment then kind of calls on or requires of all of us is to be a little bit more real about what's going on, because the reality is that we can't efficiency or strategize or twist and turn or creativity, like engineer or whatever our way out of this, that these core essential programs are already operating on shoestrings, and then the threats that are being faced are real. And then there's all these other threats that folks are facing, whether they're concerned about ICE in their neighborhoods, or they are concerned about their health insurance costs tripling or quadrupling this month, or they are concerned
about all of these. And I think that as a whole community, we have to hold that. We have to see what's really happening and be honest about it. And then we have to come together and each do our pieces and say, okay, we can't undo this part that's happening over here, but what we can still have, our doors are open, come on in, tell us what you need, and let's do our best to figure this out together. So I think there's a really important call for clear and more honest communication about the impacts of these cuts and this uncertainty. And then that call again to all of us of what's the piece that we can each do to support. And whether that is holding a food drive for your local food pantry, I think giving until it feels good, really giving generously to the organizations that need our support, going out to eat for a good cause with Eat Up for Heat Up, or in all of these other ways, how do we come together and support each other? Because amidst all of this fear that folks are experiencing and this horror, the other thing that is also happening is people are seeing and feeling their neighbors saying, not here. Mm-hmm. This is not the community that I want to live in, and I stand with my neighbors. And so I think we really need to also hold on to that piece of every ounce that we show up for each other is both the concrete resource that we're offering or how we're showing up, and it is also that statement that I've got you. I care about you. You are my neighbor. We are in this together.
More with Lev Ben Ezra, Executive Director of Community Action in Pioneer Valley, as we look at how the money for their fuel assistance, Head Start, and other programs is and is not working.
And how that dovetails with efforts like next week's Eat Up for Heat Up.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
What we are seeing more so than ever before amidst this uncertainty is that organizations like Community Action Pioneer Valley, we need community support and more flexible resources to give us the opportunity to be able to respond in the moment. And even when we can't fill the whole gap of what that program might have cost, having those flexible resources up front lets us know, okay, we can ride this out for a week or two or a month, which gives us the ability to be nimble in the moment while that fight is ongoing at the federal level and until those dollars are restored.
Yeah, everybody who runs a nonprofit knows unrestricted dollars are the best dollars because you can do whatever you want with them in the moment. You know what I mean? And all those other supports are excellent and really good, but very specifically tasked. And so if something gets chaotic and you have enough unrestricted dollars, you may be able to weather that storm.
Yeah, and it's that ability to then use things strategically and shift gears and figure out where we need to focus or to bide that time.
Lev Ben Ezra is the Executive Director of Community Action of the Pioneer Valley.
I'm excited to talk more about Eat Up for Heat Up, which is a really great way that our neighbors can get involved this month.
It is akin to one of the easiest ways that you can learn about somebody else's culture is to go out and eat. And one of the easiest ways in the area right now to support those who are heat insecure is to go out and also eat.
Going out to eat is practically my favorite thing in the world to do, so I have no good excuse.
As someone who genuinely loves to cook, who feels that cooking is like meditation, still going out to eat is one of those pleasures of life if you're able to and don't have a whole pile of allergies that need to be accommodated. That said, I think this is only the second or third year of this program. What is different about this particular? How is this year different from all the others?
Yeah, so Eat Up for Heat Up is this week plus long effort where all of these different amazing local restaurants across the valley step up and say, yes, we want to support community action. And then our neighbors and just folks who are listening get to go out and eat for a good cause. And I would say the key thing that is different about this year is just the number of restaurants that we have participating. And I'm so appreciative to all of them. It means that we have restaurants across all of those days, January 25th to 31. We have restaurants in Hampshire County and Franklin County. You mentioned allergies. We have a wide variety of cuisine cuisines and different types of food and all different things. So really most folks can find something that they're excited about. And so it's a great opportunity to either go out to that restaurant that you already love and it's just a good excuse to go frequent them again, or maybe that opportunity that you need to push to try someplace new that you've been hearing about. And I love this because it's also a great win for our local restaurants. January can be a slower month for
sure.
them. And this is that nice excuse to also give them a boost. They do so much for our community and we can also show up for them.
I generally hate lists on the radio, but I think at this time I will do a list of all of the Eat Up for Heat Up restaurants to the tune of Flight of the Bumblebee as fast as I possibly can. Starting on Sunday, January 25th with Hope and Olive in Greenfield. Monday, January 26th, Tarazza in Greenfield, Notch 8 Grill in Northampton, The Tunnel Bar in Northampton, Protocol in Amherst, Fitzwilly's Restaurant and Bar in Northampton, and Miss Florence Diner in Florence.
Check out that Monday list because Mondays are generally a day that restaurants are closed. If you're looking for a place to go out and eat, this is a good list.
Back to the list. Tuesday, January 27th, Local Burger Northampton, Johnny's Tavern in Amherst. Wednesday, January 28th, The People's Pint in Greenfield, Amherst Oyster Bar in Amherst, Highbrow Wood-Fired Kitchen and Bar in Northampton. Thursday, January 29th, Progression Brewing in Northampton, and Friday, January 30th, Miss Flo's Pizza in Florence and Paul and Elizabeth's in Northampton.
And on Saturday, January 31st, India House in Northampton and Eastside Grill in Northampton.
I almost missed that one on the list there because it was on the other page on our little cheat sheet. But all sorts of great restaurants in the restaurant community, as you mentioned, Lev, they do it for the love and the passion. There's not a ton of money in most restauranting, and they are called upon by so many organizations to support the great work that other organizations are doing, and they are donating a portion of their proceeds for Eat Up for Heat Up. What will this money specifically go to, or is it specifically tasked for anything, this Eat Up for Heat Up week starting on Sunday?
Yeah, so in the wintertime, what we see right here is that it is one of the hardest times of the year for families that are living with lower incomes. Heating costs rise, food budgets are further stretched, and just the emergencies that households are experiencing are stretched further. And we see a significant rise in demand for food and for fuel support during the winter. And so that is really where this goes. We have, it supports our heating emergencies and it supports our food programs and the resources that we have available that are flexible for our clients to access, sometimes when they don't quite fit into one of the restrictive buckets of federal resources or when they've utilized that and need a little bit of additional support.
How is state funding going for community action? What sort of state level funding do you get? Is that in jeopardy, given that the state is being relied upon so much more for things that the federal government used to provide for?
I certainly have some concerns about our state budget for exactly those reasons, that as these federal dollars that are coming to the states are threatened, and also as the state is being called upon to try to shift and stretch in so many different ways to meet these rising needs. My hope as we are awaiting next year's budget,
which is just a couple weeks away, I think, at this point.
Coming out real close, and I expect that we'll see the draft from the governor very soon, is that this is a year when we need the state to prioritize the basic needs of our Commonwealth residents. And so while I wholly understand that the state cannot make up the entire gap that is left by various federal resources, I think it is incumbent upon us that we absolutely prioritize these basic needs and are really helping to ensure that residents across the Commonwealth have food, have shelter, have heat in their homes, and have really these core needs. One specific aspect of the state budget that I will share is that there is a line item in the state budget that specifically supports community action agencies across the state. It started several years ago and was at $7.5 million. So in the scheme of the state budget, this is not huge. And that was split among the 23 community action agencies in Massachusetts. But what it did is, to your comment earlier, Monty, about more flexible funds, is it provided some of that flexible glue that was really needed to support these agencies and really help us to leverage other more restrictive state and huge amounts of federal resources into our Commonwealth. And over the last 3 years, even while need has continued to soar, that line item has been reduced from $7.5 to $5 and then to $3 million.
Wow.
And at this time, Massachusetts Community Action Programs, MassCap, is advocating strongly that in this next budget year that gets restored to the $7.5 million. We know that we need these anti-poverty programs more than ever, and we really really need those resources that are going to allow these local agencies to respond to local needs and to leverage all of the federal dollars that we can coming into our communities.
Who better to leverage than Lev? Ben Ezra, Executive Director of Community Action, Pioneer Valley. I couldn't help it.
You could, but you don't.
It was right there.
I'm right there with you. Thanks, Marcy. I'm so honored to be the source of one of your puns.
It's my pleasure. Pun intended. Eat Up for Heat Up begins this Sunday and goes through next Saturday, the 25th through the 31st. There's so many restaurants. If you don't want another laundry list to the tune of Fly to the Bumblebee, you can go to communityaction.us, and there's a link there where you can see who's up when in the next coming week. Proceeds going to support the great work that Community Action Pioneer Valley does. Lev Ben Ezra is the Executive Director of Community Action of the Pioneer Valley, newly minted into that position. This is your first year, and we hope to check in with you a couple times throughout the course of 2026 to see how we're doing as a community for Community Action, despite how the larger federal community may be doing.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here.
Oh, our pleasure.
Just eat it.
And a point that Executive Director Lev Ben Ezra really wanted us to make sure people understood is that advocacy in these cases really does work. One of the reasons that heating federal funding was brought back was because of protests by the people and leading to court cases and extra. So if you can't just eat. If eating in a restaurant doesn't seem like enough for you, speaking up about these things really does work when enough of us raise our voices.
It's almost like people have the power.
Oh,
somehow.
even though they tell us that we don't sometimes.
And Weird Al. Coming to Tanglewood this summer. Weird Al with the outro on that one. Really appreciate that. This is the music of Newport Gardner. It's a song called Crooked Shanks. It may be the first song sold by an African American, and this Newport Gardner left Newport, Rhode Island, and went to Liberia, which is what Usman Power Green was telling us about.
And they're building a whole database. It's really, really cool. It's starting to be interactive, so do check that out too.
On the next Fabulous 413, we'll give you a spot to help you round out your Veganuary?
Veganuary.
I don't even know what that is.
So there's
Vegan January?
Yes, Vegan January.
In East Hampton, as we chat with the couple behind Nourish Wellness Cafe in their new Eastworks location.
Since January continues to be months for various aesthetics, and we'll also foray into linguistics and lexicon with senior editor at Merriam-Webster, Emily Brewster.
See you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.
Peace out, y'all.